The P40 Warhawk was a sturdy and rugged aircraft that saw combat in almost every theatre in World War II, but was overshadowed in history by more elegant and advanced designs. Join me in this video as I build the Tiger Model Cute Planes series model kit of this unassuming yet important aircraft. Hello and welcome to Model Minutes. This video was chosen by you, the community, during a recent poll on my channel. Almost 90% of those who voted were in favour of seeing a build and review of this model, so here it is. Thanks to everyone who voted. Before we start the kit, as always, remember that adult supervision may be required due to the use of sharp tools and toxic paints and chemicals. Tiger Model recommends this kit for those aged 6 years old and over, due to the presence of small parts. The box features an interesting image of the P40 on the front, and this is what caught my eye in the shop. Information is presented on the sides in various languages, as well as safety warnings and pictures of other kits in the range. The rear of the box depicts the recommended paint scheme and decal placement instructions. Upon opening the box, you are presented with a plastic bag containing the various parts of the kit. The instructions are a glossy fold-out booklet which features colour and multilingual information. The exploded step-by-step diagrams are clear and easy to follow. A set of waterslide decals and an identical set of self-adhesive stickers are included, which gives you a choice in how you construct your model. Both are well printed, but I will elect to use the waterslide transfers rather than the stickers, as I feel they will give better results. I imagine the stickers are included for those who may be beginners and haven't got much confidence or experience with decals. The plastic components are held on 4 sprues. A clear one which contains the cockpit canopy, a black one which features the wheels, propeller and a few other parts, and the majority on 2 dark green sprues. The parts are well moulded with no flash and feature a reasonable amount of detail, despite being a stylised design and not being to any particular scale. I didn't see any instructions to wash the parts prior to assembly, so decided to see how the kit would turn out if this step was omitted. I imagine it's not mentioned, so the keen builders amongst you can get stuck right into the build of the kit. If, however, you do wish to clean the parts, a wash in warm soapy water will help to remove any grease or dirt from the surface of the plastic and help give a better surface for cement and paint to stick to. The cockpit components were cut from the sprue using a sharp knife, and any burrs cleaned up with a nail file. Throughout this build I will be using Tamiya Extra Thin Cement, which has a good flow quality and can be applied accurately with the included brush in the lid. I don't believe that cementing the model together is entirely necessary, however, as many of the parts clip into position, but I will use the cement to ensure that it stays assembled. With the cockpit built, I then removed the 2 fuselage halves from their sprue and cleaned up with a nail file. The component that represents the air intake on the nose was then cemented into place. Next, I painted the internal areas with Humbrol 81 matte pale yellow acrylic, which I had left over from the Airfix Pearl Harbor gift set. The P40 in that kit has almost the same paint scheme as this model, so I have chosen to use the same paints. At times, I add a drop of water to the paint to help thin it and improve its flow quality. A thinner paint will leave less visible brushstrokes, but more coats built up in layers will be needed to get a good even finish. With that coat of paint dry, I then picked out the pilot's headrest in Humbrol 29 Dark Earth Matte Acrylic. Next, I added the decal for the control panel. It was cut from the sheet, soaked in warm water, and when ready, gently slid off the backing paper into the correct position. The control panel part had been given a coat of Humbrol decal fix to help soften the decal into the surface details. When the decal was positioned correctly, it was then given a further coat of decal fix to further soften it and improve its adhesion. The propeller parts were then removed from the sprue and the retaining pin cemented into the rear of the propeller. If careful during the assembly, the prop can be made to spin, so be careful with your cement. The spinner was then painted with Humbrol 174 signal red satin acrylic. A few coats were needed to give a good even finish. The cockpit assembly was then cemented into one half of the fuselage and left to cure. The upper and lower wing surfaces were removed from their sprues, cleaned up and then assembled. The ailerons are installed into their slots, and if you're careful with the cement, they can be moved up and down freely. The landing gear parts are then cut from their sprues and the wheel hubs are clipped inside the wheels. If you're careful, these too can be made to rotate freely, adding an element of play value to the model. It's worth noting that if you intend to use the decals for the wheel hubs, this would be the time to apply them. I add them later and end up having to cut them in half and reassembling them in order to allow them to fit around the landing gear supports. When complete, the landing gear was then cemented into position in the lower wing assembly, as was the drop tank, which comes in two halves and had to be cemented together before locating into the correct position. The tail wheel was added to one of the fuselage halves, and then, with the propeller assembly in position, the other fuselage half was cemented over the top, holding all the internal parts in place. The wings were then added to the fuselage, and the model is really starting to take shape. The tail surfaces were cut from their sprue and then also cemented into the correct place at the rear of the model, and it's at this stage that I was ready to begin painting. The lower surfaces were given a number of coats of Humbrol 165 medium sea grey satin acrylic. I used this straight out of the pot and found it worked quite well. The upper surfaces were painted in Humbrol 155 olive drab matte acrylic. Whilst the paint was drying, I moved on to the clear canopy part and painted the frames using the same paint. I did this freehand with a fine paintbrush, taking care with the application in order to avoid painting the wrong areas. If you do get some acrylic paint in the wrong place on this clear part, it is relatively easy to remove by gently scratching it off, but care must be taken to not scratch the plastic. Humbrol 11 silver acrylic was used to pick out the landing gear struts and the wheel hub on the tail wheel. The entire model was then given a coat of Humbrol 135 acrylic satin varnish, which I thinned with a little water to help it flow better. This coat of paint will become the base for the decals and help prevent leaving any silvering on them when they are applied. A gloss or satin varnish tends to work well for this, but a matte varnish will unfortunately make silvering worse. Humbrol 53 gunmetal grey acrylic was used to highlight the engine exhausts on the nose and the gun barrels on the wings. The decals were then applied by cutting them from the sheet, soaking in warm water and then sliding off the backing paper into the correct place. Humbrol decal fix was used just as before during the cockpit construction by adding it to the surfaces to help encourage the decals to soften into the detail and appear painted on. For more information on decal application, take a look for the tutorial I made on this topic on my channel. Whilst you watch the completion of this step, I'll tell you a bit more about the real P40 Warhawk. The P40 was a fighter aircraft designed in the late 1930s. It was utilised by many Allied air forces in the early days of World War II and was the main fighter aircraft of the United States Army Air Force in 1941. The version depicted in this kit is that of a P40E as used by the Flying Tigers, a squadron of American volunteers flying as part of the Chinese Air Force in combat against the Japanese invasion during World War II. The P40E Warhawk had 6 50 cal machine guns in the wings, which presented a formidable amount of firepower against the lightly armoured Japanese aircraft. With the decals applied, a further coat of Humbrol 135 satin varnish was added to the model, but this time it was the enamel version. It was thinned with white spirit to help it flow better. The reason the enamel version was used was in order to protect the previous acrylic layers in the next stage of the construction. Citadel Known Oil was brushed over the model with the intention of bringing out all the recessed detail and panel lines. The excess wash was then removed by using a cotton bud dipped in Tamiya acrylic thinners. Wiping the cotton bud across the surface of the model in the direction of airflow will clean the wash off the surface of the model but allow it to remain in the recessed detail. A final coat of paint was then applied, this time Humbrol 49 matte varnish enamel, which was again thinned with white spirit. This will help give an even and realistic finish. The last step in the build of this kit was to add the cockpit canopy, which I just pushed into position until it was clipped in place. And here's the finished model. I found this to be a fun little build, particularly as I do quite like P40s, and this is the 4th version I've built on my channel. It's an interesting model with a good element of play value due to the rotating prop, wheels and moving ailerons. The paint scheme is easy to replicate, and the pre-coloured sprues and inclusion of stickers makes this even easier if you need them. Retailing for about £10 in the United Kingdom at the time of this video, I do feel that it is a reasonable price for this kit, given the quality of the various components. It didn't take particularly long to construct, and you could find that it might only take an afternoon to get it to a completed stage. In conclusion, I really enjoyed building this kit, and I think it looks great. It's not to any scale and has quite a cartoony appearance, but I feel it will add interest to any model collection as well as being a conversation piece. I'm impressed with the kit of this rugged aircraft from Tiger Model and more than happy with the finished results I've achieved with my Curtiss P40 Warhawk. As always, let me know what you think of my build, techniques and finished model in the comments below. I'm also keen to hear your suggestions as to other kits that you'd like to see me build on my channel, so feel free to post that too. All that's left to say is thanks for watching this video, and don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe in order to see more content and turn those notifications on to help support the channel. Feel free to share this video with your family and friends, and don't forget that you can connect with me on social media. I'm on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. See you all again next time.